They didn't rule when it comes to the Aliens and Enemy Act. What they said was this was the wrong venue, that the D.C. Circuit Court had no jurisdiction over that. But they also said, listen, if there's due process, then they have to do it through the normal channels, through a habeas writ. So what is the administration reaction to all that the Supreme Court just said yesterday?
Well, Lawrence, this is a landmark victory for the rule of law. And this is what we've been arguing on behalf of President Trump from day one. These are enemies of our state, of our country, and they should be deported. And what the judge ruled was going forward, from this day forward, all those planes that are gone are there. Those people are staying. So there are a lot of reasons why Americans are safer. From this point forward, the hearing will be held, it's a habeas hearing, in the court of confinement, which means in Texas. Yeah. So it will be a much faster hearing. They can't do class actions. It will be a much smoother, simpler hearing. And
going forward, there's no shopping as it relates to immigration anymore. If someone is detained and scheduled for a deportation, they can no longer shop across the country for a judge, a liberal-leaning judge. All the cases going forward have to go to that Texas judge. Is that correct?
Correct, Lawrence, and that's what was happening. These liberal district judges thought that they could control our entire country's policy, Donald Trump's policy, on keeping America safe. They cannot do it, and this was, again, a landmark ruling for the rule of law yesterday, and it's so important because these flights will now continue. These terrorists, they are foreign terrorists, they are alien enemies to our country, and we will continue to deport them. There is a hearing scheduled today at 3 p.m. He is not canceling the hearing. He is continuing on with the hearing, but the Supreme Court has spoken loud and clear. He has no jurisdiction. That flight will remain in El Salvador. Those inmates, those violent gang members, those violent alien enemies will remain in El Salvador. He cannot get them back.
Yeah, so the Supreme Court's ruling here was pretty narrow, but nevertheless, both sides are claiming victory to some extent after the High Court's 5-4 ruling on Monday. I want you to take a listen to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem.
Today is a bad day to be a terrorist in the United States of America. Today, the Supreme Court came out with a decision that reaffirmed President Trump was correct in using his authority on using the Alien Enemies Act to deport terrorists out of this country.
Attorney General Pam Bondi saying tonight's decision is a landmark victory for the rule of law. An activist judge in Washington, D.C. does not have the jurisdiction to seize control of President Trump's authority to conduct foreign policy and keep the American people safe. But the Supreme Court did not decide whether the administration's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act was constitutional. It ruled that the challengers brought their lawsuit to the wrong court. They should have filed it in a Texas federal court where the detentions took place and not in a D.C. federal court. The justices also agree that detainees must have the chance to challenge their removals, and the ACLU is taking that as a victory. Federal Judge James Boasberg, who had initially blocked the Trump administration from continuing those deportation flights under the Alien Enemies Act, is holding a hearing today. He will likely take the Supreme Court's decision into account.
Another big story out of the High Court today. The justices are ruling, in fact, they did so late last night, that the Trump administration can use the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to carry out deportations. Here's what the White House said when it discussed what it is calling a big win for its immigration agenda.
This was a huge, a monumental victory for President Trump, the biggest legal win of this administration so far. This is a monumental, colossal victory for the rule of law, for the Constitution.
Look, Stephen Miller is correct that this is the biggest victory the administration has scored so far when it comes to testing President Trump's expansive use of executive power. But as you noted, this was not a total victory. This was a partial victory because while the Supreme Court sided with the administration, it did place limitations on how they can use these powers, saying that immigrants should get a chance to contest their deportations. So people who are deported should receive notice. They are subject to this act and an opportunity to have their removal reviewed by a federal court where they were being detained. And that is significant because one of the reasons they wanted to use the Alien Enemies Act is to speed up deportations. But look, this is undoubtedly a green light for the administration in terms of Trump's expansive use of executive power. Also, this is happening in a case where a federal judge is looking at whether the administration intentionally defied his initial pause on the use of this act. So this is significant. And as Leanne and others were noting, this has always been the long game that Stephen Miller and others at the Justice Department have been playing. They believe that even if they were initially deterred by lower courts, that when these questions eventually got to the justices, that the conservative supermajority would see things their way. And for now, they have the green light to go ahead with this.